The magnate and the unexpected encounter. The shared table. A millionaire took her twin sons to dinner and froze when she saw a single father sitting with his little girl. No one understood her gesture, and what she did next was simply incredible. If you believe in finding magic in the ordinary, hit like and subscribe now. This is the story of how two disparate lives found a perfect balance. Daniel. Danny Bastos closed the apartment door with more care than he intended. His hands were still trembling slightly from the exhaustion accumulated in his muscles. That type of fatigue that settles into the bones after 10 straight hours of physical work under the relentless sun. He kicked off his muddy boots at the entrance and let out a long, deep sigh, the first of the day not mixed with orders or machinery noise. But before he could even lean against the wall to catch his breath, he heard small, hurried footsteps coming from the living room. Luna appeared in the hallway like a flash of dark curls and bright eyes, with that smile that could illuminate any dark corner of his life. She was wearing her favorite dress, the light blue one, with embroidered flowers that was already a little short, but that she refused to stop wearing. She had styled her own hair with that clumsy dedication of a 6-year-old who wanted to look pretty for a special occasion. Danny felt something tighten in his chest. Today was Thursday, the day he had promised. Luna hadn't forgotten a single detail. She had waited all week with a patience he didn't deserve, marking the days on the kitchen calendar with colored crayons. "Daddy is taking me to dinner," she had told her teacher, the neighbor, anyone who would listen. And now she stood before him, eyes full of that pure joy that only children know how to sustain without asking for anything in return. "Are we going now, Daddy?" Luna asked, almost breathless, as if she had been running even though she had only crossed the hallway. Danny swallowed. He wanted to sit down. He wanted to take off his sweaty shirt, shower, collapse on the sofa, and close his eyes for a moment. But when he looked into those hopeful eyes, he knew there was no turning back. "Of course, my love. Just give me a few minutes to change, and we'll go." Luna jumped with happiness and ran back to the living room, where she would continue waiting with that contained excitement that made her move in circles. Danny walked toward his room, feeling the weight of every step, but also something lighter in his chest. He didn't have much. The money he had saved over the past few weeks barely stretched to a modest dinner somewhere other than his kitchen. But for Luna, that was more than enough. For her, dining out with her daddy was a memorable event, something she would remember with the intensity that children hold on to important moments. Danny showered quickly, letting the warm water wash away the dust and tiredness of the day. He put on a clean shirt, the only one he had without paint or grease stains, and glanced briefly in the mirror. The dark circles under his eyes were evident, his shoulders slumped with fatigue, but in his eyes, there was something else. There was determination. There was love. There was the silent promise that no matter how difficult everything else was, he would always find a way to be present for his daughter. When he left the room, Luna was waiting by the door with her small purse hanging from her shoulder. She was radiant. Danny took her hand, and they walked out together into the night. The restaurant wasn't far. It was a place Danny had seen many times on his way to work, with its warm lights and discreet facade that promised good food without pretension. It wasn't fancy. It didn't have reserved tables or hosts in suits, but it had something better. It had heart, or at least that's what he had heard. Luna walked beside him with small but determined steps, talking non-stop about her day at school, about the teacher who had given her a gold star for her drawing, about her friend Sophia, who had shared her lunch. Danny listened to every word with attention, nodding, smiling, letting his daughter's voice fill the empty space the exhaustion had left in his mind. When they arrived, The restaurant doors opened with a soft chime. The interior was cozy, with wooden tables and simple tablecloths lit by hanging lamps that created a calm atmosphere. Danny immediately noticed there were two distinct areas. The common area, where most of the tables were occupied by families and couples chatting animatedly, and at the back, separated by a slight elevation and decorative screens, a more exclusive area with dimmer lights and an atmosphere clearly reserved for those who could pay for privacy. Danny guided Luna toward the common area. A kind waitress greeted them with a genuine smile and led them to a small table by the window. Luna sat down carefully, as if in a sacred place, and looked at the menu with huge eyes. Although she couldn't read all the words yet, Danny sat across from her, finally feeling like he could breathe. The knot in his back began to loosen. Here, in this moment, there were no bills to pay, no impossible schedules, no pitying glances or silent judgments. There was only Luna smiling, happy, and that was all that mattered. "What are you going to order, Daddy?" Luna asked, leaning across the table with curiosity. Danny quickly checked the menu, mentally calculating the prices. "I think I'll order something simple, but you can choose whatever you want, my love." Luna looked at him with that sudden seriousness children sometimes adopt when they want to say something important. "I want the same thing as you, Daddy." Danny felt something gently break inside him. It wasn't sadness. Not exactly. It was something deeper, harder to name. It was the understanding that his daughter, despite her young age, had already learned to take care of him in ways she shouldn't. That she already knew how to read between the lines. That she understood more than he wanted to admit. "All right, Luna. Today is a special day. You can order whatever you truly like." Luna smiled, and in that smile was something of relief, something of hope, something that made Danny promise himself he would find a way to give her more nights like this. Just as the waitress returned to take their order, Danny heard children's voices approaching. He looked up and saw two identical children, twins, running toward their table with boundless energy. Behind them, walking with measured steps and an impeccable posture, came a woman. Danny noticed her immediately. It was hard not to. She wore a long, elegant coat that fit her figure perfectly, and her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. But it wasn't her appearance that captured his attention. It was the expression on her face. Cold, contained, as if she were accustomed to keeping the world at bay. The twins arrived first. One of them, the one with slightly lighter hair, Lucas, pointed enthusiastically at Luna. "Look, Elias, she has the same dress we saw in the store." The other boy, Elias, nodded with equal excitement. "It's exactly the same." Luna looked at them with surprise but no fear. There was something in the children's sincerity that broke down any barrier. Danny, for his part, looked at the woman, Isabel, who was now approaching with an awkward expression. "Lucas, Elias, come here," she said in a firm voice, but without raising her tone. The children didn't move. "Mommy, we want to sit here," Lucas said, pointing to Danny's table. The woman Isabel stopped a few feet away. Her eyes met Danny's for a brief but penetrating moment. He saw awkwardness, perhaps embarrassment, but also something harder to decipher. "Excuse me," Isabel said, addressing Danny with a courtesy that seemed more automatic than genuine. "My children can be insistent." Danny smiled, and it was a tired but real smile. "Don't worry, they're just children. If they want to stay, they can. It doesn't bother me at all." Isabel looked at him intently, as if trying to figure out if he was serious or just being polite. Danny held her gaze without discomfort. He had nothing to hide, nothing to prove. Isabel hesitated. The twins had already sat down, one next to Luna and the other in the empty chair next to Danny. Luna looked at them with a mixture of shyness and curiosity, but didn't seem bothered. On the contrary, there was a sparkle in her eyes that Danny recognized immediately. The sparkle of a girl who rarely had the opportunity to play with other children outside of school. With an almost imperceptible sigh, Isabel approached and took the remaining chair, facing Danny. "Thank you," she said, and this time her voice had a different nuance, softer, less defensive. Danny nodded. "No problem." The waitress returned now with an amused expression at the table's new configuration. She took the additional orders, while the twins began chatting with Luna about their favorite drawings, their toys, their television shows. Isabel remained silent during the first few minutes, observing. Danny also kept silent, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of someone accustomed to observing, listening, and being present without needing to fill every space with words. Finally, Isabel spoke. "Do you come here often?" Danny shook his head. "It's the first time. I promised Luna I would take her out for dinner. She's been waiting all week." Isabel looked at Luna, who was now laughing with the twins over something Elias had said. Something in her expression softened. "She looks happy." Danny nodded. "That's the only thing that matters." Isabel looked at him again, this time with more attention. There was something in the way he spoke, in the way he looked at his daughter, that didn't fit any of the categories she usually used to classify people. There was no pretense, no bitterness, only simple, straightforward love. "And you?" Danny asked, breaking the silence. "Do you come here often?" Isabel hesitated. "We used to. Now it's harder to find time." Danny didn't ask more. He recognized that answer. He knew it well. It was the answer of someone who had sacrificed a lot to get where they were. Someone who carried more weight than they showed. The children continued chatting animatedly. Luna had taken out one of her crayons from her purse and was drawing something on a paper napkin while Lucas and Elias watched, fascinated. Isabel observed them with an expression difficult to decipher. There was tenderness, but also something akin to nostalgia, as if she were remembering something she had lost long ago. The food arrived shortly after. The dishes were simple but well prepared, and the aroma filled the table with a comforting warmth. Luna looked at her plate with bright eyes, then looked at Danny. "Thank you, Daddy." Danny felt the exhaustion of the day completely vanish. "You're welcome, my love." The five ate in relative calm. The twins continued talking, asking questions, sharing stories, and Luna responded with a shyness that was slowly dissolving. Isabel barely touched her food. She observed more than she participated, but there was something in her gaze Danny couldn't ignore. It was as if she were trying to understand something, to decipher an enigma she didn't know existed. At one point, Luna picked up a piece of her dessert, a small chocolate cake she had ordered so carefully, and broke it into 3. She offered a piece to Lucas and another to Elias. "Do you want to share?" The twins eagerly accepted. Isabel froze, watching the scene with an intensity Danny couldn't interpret. When their eyes met again, there was something different in Isabel's eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Vulnerability. Danny said nothing. There was nothing to say. Sometimes words only ruined moments that needed to be felt in silence. Isabel looked away toward the window, where the city lights flickered in the distance, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel something she had buried under layers of control and responsibility. She allowed herself to feel that maybe, just maybe, there was something more important than everything she had built. Part 2. The unspoken value. The dinner continued with unexpected fluidity. The children had created their own world at that table, a small universe where differences didn't matter, and laughter was the only necessary language. Luna had lost almost all her initial shyness, and now chatted with Lucas and Elias as if she had known them all her life. They talked about simple things, favorite colors, animals they were afraid of, the superheroes in their drawings. Danny listened to them as he finished his meal, feeling an uncommon tranquility. There was something comforting about seeing Luna so happy, so natural. She didn't have many friends outside of school. The circumstances of their life, Danny's tight schedule, the money that never stretched to extracurricular activities, had limited her opportunities to socialize. Seeing how she opened up to these two unknown children reminded him of something he had forgotten amidst the daily tiredness. Luna was just a girl who needed to laugh, play, and be a child. Isabel remained in her contemplative silence. She had taken barely a few bites of her food, more out of habit than real hunger. Her attention was completely absorbed by the scene before her. She watched how her children interacted with Luna, how Danny responded with infinite patience to every question they asked, how his tired face lit up every time Luna looked at him. There was a simplicity in all of it that deeply unsettled her. In her world, dinners were carefully orchestrated events. There were pre-selected menus, conversations that followed certain protocols, silences that were filled with expensive wine and elaborate desserts. But here, at this makeshift table, there were none of those structures. There were only people sharing a moment, and that, somehow inexplicably, felt more real than anything she had experienced in years. "What do you do for work?" Isabel asked suddenly, surprising herself with the question. Danny looked up, wiping his hands with a napkin before answering. "Construction. I work on building sites mostly." Isabel nodded slowly. "How long have you been doing that?" "Almost 8 years," Danny replied without hesitation. "Since Luna was born." Isabel noticed something in the way he said that, as if those two events were irremediably connected. She didn't ask more, but Danny seemed to understand the unasked question. "Her mother died when she was 6 months old," he said in a calm but firm voice. "Since then, it's just been the two of us." The silence that followed was not awkward, but dense. Isabel felt something contract in her chest. It wasn't pity. Not exactly. It was something more complex, a mixture of respect and recognition. Recognition of a burden that she hadn't had to carry alone. "I'm sorry," Isabel said. And this time, her voice didn't sound automatic. It sounded genuine. Danny nodded with a small smile. "Thank you, but it's okay. We have what we need." Isabel looked at Luna, who was now teaching the twins how to draw a perfect star on the napkin. The girl was beaming with happiness. They have it? Isabel thought. Because from where she was sitting, it looked like they did. It looked like they had more than many people with overflowing bank accounts and calendars full of empty commitments. "And you?" Danny asked, interrupting her thoughts. "What do you do?" Isabel hesitated. That question usually had a rehearsed, polished answer, designed to impress or to maintain distance depending on the situation. But here, sitting at this table, with this man of quiet gaze and working hands, none of those answers seemed adequate. "I run a firm," she finally said. "Real estate, mostly investments." Danny nodded, showing neither impression nor disinterest. Just acceptance. "It must be demanding." Isabel let out a short, almost bitter laugh. "That's a kind way of putting it." Danny looked at her attentively. "Is it worth it?" The question caught her by surprise. No one asked her that. No one questioned whether the path she had chosen was worth the effort. It was assumed that it was, because she was successful, because she had money, because she had power. But Danny wasn't asking about those things. He was asking about something deeper. "I don't know," Isabel admitted in a low voice. "Sometimes I think so." She looked at Lucas and Elias, who were now laughing as Luna told them a story about a dog she had seen in the park. "Other times, I'm not sure what I'm truly building." Danny didn't respond immediately. He took a sip of water and looked out the window, where the city continued its tireless rhythm. "I think we all build something," he finally said. The question is whether what we build makes us happy or just keeps us busy. Isabel felt those words pierce something vulnerable she had forgotten existed. She couldn't answer. She had no answer. The waitress returned to clear the empty plates and offer coffee. Danny politely declined, explaining that Luna needed to sleep early. Isabel also refused, though not for the same reasons. She simply didn't want to prolong a moment that already felt too charged with emotions she didn't know how to handle. "Daddy, can we come back another day?" Luna asked with hopeful eyes. Danny smiled and stroked her hair. "We'll see, my love." Isabel knew that children understood that "we'll see" as a conditional promise, a possibility that depended on factors beyond immediate control. But that wasn't a definitive rejection. Lucas leaned toward Isabel. "Mommy, can we see them again?" Isabel looked at her son, then at Danny, who clearly didn't expect that question. She didn't expect it either. "I don't know if," Isabel began, searching for a diplomatic way out. But then Luna interrupted with a shy but hopeful voice. "I want to too." The four children looked at the adults with identical expressions of hope. Isabel felt the weight of those glances. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair that these children, in their innocence, created expectations that the adult world couldn't easily fulfill. But when she looked at Danny, she didn't see awkwardness or rejection. She only saw a man waiting, not pushing, not judging. "We can exchange numbers," Danny said finally, "if you want." Isabel felt something inside her yield. It wasn't a rational decision. It didn't make sense. This man was a complete stranger. Their lives had no logical point of intersection, but there was something in the way he looked at her, something in the peace he radiated, despite his obvious exhaustion, that made all her usual defenses seem unnecessary. "All right," Isabel said, pulling out her phone. Danny did the same, an old device with a scratched but functional screen. They exchanged numbers while the children celebrated as if they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Perhaps it was. The bill arrived shortly after. Danny took it before Isabel could even reach for her wallet. "My treat," he said firmly. Isabel frowned. "That's not necessary. We're more people now because of us." "I know," Danny replied with a small smile. "But I invited Luna to dinner. You just joined us. It's different." Isabel wanted to protest. She could see the price on the bill. She knew it probably represented a significant part of what Danny had saved. But she also understood with a sudden clarity that insisting would be taking something important away from him. It would be turning this moment into charity, and that would destroy everything genuine about this evening. "Thank you," Isabel said finally. Danny paid in cash, counting the bills carefully. Isabel looked away, not out of embarrassment, but out of respect. When they left the restaurant, the night air felt different. The children walked ahead, still chatting, still laughing. Danny and Isabel followed in silence. "Thank you for tonight," Isabel said, when they reached the corner where their paths would diverge. "I didn't expect—" She paused, unsure how to finish that sentence. "Me neither," Danny replied, "but I'm glad it happened." Isabel looked at him one last time. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen in a long time in the people around her. There was honesty. There was kindness. There was a silent strength that didn't need to prove itself. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night, Isabel." The twins said goodbye to Luna with enthusiastic hugs, promising to send drawings over the phone. Luna reciprocated with her characteristic shyness, but with a smile that lit up her face. Isabel took Lucas and Elias's hands and began walking toward where her car was waiting. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Danny bending down to pick up Luna, who was clearly exhausted, but happy. She would have seen how he held her with that infinite tenderness of a father who knows the value of every moment. She would have seen something that would have broken her heart in the most necessary way. But she didn't look back. She wasn't ready to confront what that image would mean. Part 3. The Unfolding Promise. The First Date. Isabel didn't sleep well that night. She stayed awake in her room, staring at the ceiling as the hours passed with frustrating slowness. The house was silent. Lucas and Elias had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the day's excitement. But she couldn't find rest. Her mind kept returning to the restaurant, to that improvised table, to Daniel's tranquil gaze. It didn't make sense. She had met hundreds of people in her life, closed multi-million-dollar deals with powerful entrepreneurs, conversed with influential people who moved entire industries. But none of those interactions had left her with this strange feeling in her chest, this mixture of restlessness and something akin to nostalgia for something she had never had. She got up before dawn, unable to continue pretending she would sleep. She made coffee in the silent kitchen, watching the city begin to wake up through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Isabel held the mug between her hands, feeling the comforting warmth, but not finding the solace she sought. Her phone rested on the counter. She stared at it for several minutes before finally unlocking it. She opened her contacts and found the number she had saved the night before. Daniel Bastos. Simple, direct, without compound last names or corporate titles. Just a name. Isabel didn't know what she expected when she saved it. She had no plans to call. It had been a gesture for the children, nothing more, a courtesy so as not to disappoint them. But now, in the stillness of the early morning, she found herself wanting to write something. What would she say? "Thanks for the night. It was a pleasure meeting you." It all sounded inadequate, too formal, or too casual. Isabel put the phone back down and took a long sip of coffee. This was ridiculous. She had more important things to think about. She had scheduled meetings, contracts to review, decisions to make. She didn't have time to be caught up thinking about a man she had met by chance over dinner. But when Lucas and Elias came down for breakfast a few hours later, the first thing they asked was when they would see Luna again. "Mommy, can we call them today?" Lucas asked while pouring cereal. Isabel stirred her coffee, searching for a reasonable-sounding answer. "I don't think it's appropriate to bother them so soon." "Why not?" Elias insisted. "They gave us their number. That means they want us to call them." Isabel sighed. Adults sometimes give out their numbers out of courtesy, not necessarily because they expect to be called right away. "But we're not adults," Lucas replied, with unassailable childish logic. Isabel couldn't help but smile slightly at that. He was right, of course. Children lived in a world where intentions were clear, and relationships were built without all the layers of complication that adults added. "I'll see what I can do," she finally said, knowing that answer wouldn't satisfy her children, but needing time to process her own thoughts. The following days were strangely restless. Isabel plunged into work with her usual intensity, attending meetings, reviewing proposals, making decisions that moved millions. But there was a constant distraction, a recurring thought that appeared at the most inopportune moments. She found herself thinking about Daniel during an important presentation. She wondered how his day was going while she was signing contracts, and when she came home in the evenings, she found Lucas and Elias talking about Luna as if she were their best friend, despite having met her only once. "Mommy, Luna sent us a drawing," Elias announced one afternoon, showing her his tablet, where there was a photo of a crayon drawing. It was simple, childish, but it had that genuine charm only children could create. Isabel felt something strange upon seeing it. "How did she send it?" she asked, confused. "Daniel texted us," Lucas replied naturally. "We gave him our number, remember?" Isabel froze. No, she didn't remember the children exchanging numbers directly, but apparently they had done so with that effortless ease that only children had, for connecting without complications. "What else have you talked about?" Isabel asked, trying to sound casual. "Stuff," Elias replied, with typical childish vagueness. "Luna told us about her school, and Daniel asked how we were." Isabel felt a mix of difficult-to-name emotions. She wasn't annoyed exactly, but there was something unsettling about knowing that this connection had continued without her direct participation. "Did you reply?" Lucas nodded. "We told them we were fine, and that we wanted to see them again." Isabel took a deep breath. "And what did they say?" "That they wanted to too," Elias replied with a smile, "but that they had to wait because Daniel works a lot." Something in those words touched Isabel more deeply than she expected. She could perfectly imagine Daniel saying that, with that direct honesty that wasn't ashamed of his circumstances. That night, after putting the boys to bed, Isabel finally picked up her phone and opened the conversation Lucas and Elias had initiated with Daniel. She saw the exchanged messages, the photos of drawings, the simple questions about the day, and at the end, she saw a message from Daniel that the boys hadn't mentioned. "I hope Isabel is doing well. Tell her Luna asks about her too." Isabel stared at those words for a long time. There was something in them that completely disarmed her. There was no presumption, no expectation, just genuine consideration. She typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on something simple. "Hello, Daniel. It's Isabel. The boys showed me the messages. Thank you for staying in touch with them. They are very excited." The response came almost immediately, as if he had been waiting. "Hello, Isabel. Luna talks about Lucas and Elias every day, too. I think that night meant a lot to her." Isabel felt something tighten in her chest. "For my sons, too," she wrote. "They aren't used to—" She stopped, unsure how to finish that phrase without sounding condescending or revealing too much. Daniel replied after a few seconds to what? Isabel hesitated before replying with honesty. "To connecting so easily with other children. Our lives are complicated." "I understand," Daniel wrote. "But children have a way of simplifying things. Maybe we should learn from them." Isabel smiled slightly, something rare for her lately. "Maybe. How are you doing?" "Occupied," she replied automatically. Then, surprising herself, she added, "And a little tired, if I'm honest." Daniel didn't reply immediately. When he did, his words were careful. "Tiredness is different when we know what we are tired for." Isabel read those words several times. There was a depth in them that made her feel seen in a way she didn't expect. "That makes sense to you," she wrote. "More than it should." "And you? How are you? Tired too?" "Admittedly, yes," Daniel replied. "But it's different. I know exactly why I'm tired. And that makes it easier to bear." Isabel felt a pang of something akin to envy. It wasn't for his economic situation, obviously. It was for that clarity he had, that certainty of purpose that she lacked. "The children want to organize something together," Isabel wrote after a moment. "Maybe a day at the park or something. If you have time." "I would love that," Daniel replied. "But I have to be honest with you. My schedule is unpredictable. Some days I work late. I don't want to promise something and then disappoint Luna or your boys." Isabel felt respect for that honesty. "I understand. We can be flexible. Maybe the next weekend you're free? Does that work for you?" "It works perfectly for me," Daniel wrote. "And thank you for understanding." Isabel looked at the screen, feeling something warm expand in her chest. She didn't know exactly what this thing starting between them was, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to control or define it. She was simply letting it happen. "Good night, Daniel. Good night, Isabel. Rest." Isabel left the phone on the nightstand and went to bed, finally feeling some peace. Outside, the city continued its tireless rhythm. But inside her room, There was a stillness she hadn't felt in years. And for the first time since that night in the restaurant, she slept deeply. 7. The first date. The crossing of the line. Saturday arrived with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that promised a perfect day. Isabel woke up early, unusual for a weekend, but there was an anticipation in her chest that wouldn't let her sleep. Lucas and Elias had been counting the days all week, marking each one on the calendar with growing excitement, and they would finally see Luna again. Daniel had confirmed the day before that they would be free. His message had been brief but warm. "See you tomorrow at the park." Luna hasn't stopped talking about this. Isabel had carefully chosen the park. It wasn't the closest to her house, but it wasn't too far from the area where Daniel lived either. It was a spacious place with leafy trees, play areas for children, and quiet paths, a neutral ground where both families could meet without the economic differences being too obvious. She dressed in casual clothes, something she rarely did. She left aside her elegant suits and opted for jeans and a simple blouse. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. But there was something liberating in that image. It was Isabel, without the layers of authority and control she normally projected. Just Isabel. Lucas and Elias ran down the stairs, already dressed and ready, with an energy that made the whole house seem to vibrate. "Can we go now?" Lucas asked. For the third time in 10 minutes, Isabel checked her watch. It was still half an hour before the agreed time. "If we leave now, we'll arrive too early." "It doesn't matter," Elias replied. "We can wait." Isabel smiled at their impatience. She knew there was no point in resisting. "All right, let's go." The ride to the park was accompanied by the twins' incessant conversation. They talked about what games they would teach Luna, what stories they would tell her, whether Daniel would know how to play soccer. Isabel listened to them in silence, feeling something strange in her chest. Her sons were genuinely excited about something simple. There were no expensive toys involved, no elaborate events, just the promise of spending time with another girl and her father. When they arrived at the park, Isabel parked, and the three walked toward the agreed-upon area. It was a wide-open space near the swings, with benches under the shade of old trees. Isabel saw Daniel almost immediately. He was sitting on one of the benches with Luna by his side. The girl was wearing the same dress from dinner, clearly her favorite, and nervously swung her legs while looking around for them. When Luna saw them, her face lit up. She jumped off the bench and ran toward them with open arms. Lucas and Elias ran too, and the three met in the middle of the path with hugs and laughter. Daniel stood up and walked toward Isabel with calm steps. He wore simple clothes, worn jeans, and a cotton shirt, but there was something in his posture that conveyed dignity. "Good morning," he said with a genuine smile. "Good morning," Isabel replied, feeling that same inexplicable nervousness she had felt at the restaurant. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting us," Daniel replied. "Luna didn't sleep well last night from excitement." Isabel laughed softly. "Lucas and Elias didn't either." They looked at each other for a moment, that kind of silence that wasn't awkward, but full of unspoken things. Finally, Daniel pointed toward the children, who were already running toward the swings. "We should follow them before they disappear." Isabel nodded, and both walked side by side, maintaining a respectful distance, but conscious of the other's presence. The children played with total freedom. They chased each other among the trees, took turns on the swings, invented games with rules that changed every 5 minutes. Daniel and Isabel watched them from a nearby bench, intervening only when necessary to prevent an accident or resolve a minor dispute. "It's nice to see them like this," Isabel commented after a while. "So free," Daniel nodded. "Children don't need much to be happy. They just need space to be kids." Isabel looked at him out of the corner of her eye. Have you always been so philosophical? Daniel smiled. I don't know if philosophical is the right word. I've just learned to appreciate the simple things. When you don't have much, you learn to value what you do have. There was no bitterness in his words, only acceptance. Isabel felt a pang of something she couldn't immediately identify. Guilt. Shame. Not exactly. It was more like an awareness of how much she had taken for granted her entire life. I've forgotten how to do that, Isabel admitted in a low voice. Appreciate the simple things. Daniel looked at her intently. I don't think you've forgotten. I think you've just been too busy. Isabel felt the weight of that observation. Does that make it okay? Daniel shrugged. It's not my place to judge what's right or wrong for you. Only you know what you need. But, he hesitated before continuing. Sometimes I think we complicate life more than necessary. We look for big things, thinking they will fill us, when what we really need is right in front of us. Isabel followed his gaze to the children. Luna was teaching Elias how to make a chain of flowers, while Lucas looked for more wildflowers on the grass. It was a scene so simple, so ordinary, but there was something profoundly beautiful in it. How do you do it? Isabel asked suddenly. How do you stay so at peace with everything you carry, raising Luna alone, working so much? How do you not break down? Daniel remained silent for a long moment, considering the question seriously. There are days when I do break down, he finally admitted. Days when Luna gets sick, and I can't miss work. Days when the money doesn't stretch, and I have to choose between paying a bill or buying something she needs. Days when I feel completely alone and don't know if I'm doing things right. He paused, looking at Luna with infinite tenderness. But then I look at her and remember why I do all this. She doesn't ask me for material things. She just asks me to be present. And that, although sometimes it's the hardest thing, is also the simplest. Isabel felt something break inside her. It wasn't a painful fracture, but rather the crumbling of a wall she had built for years. And what if you don't know how to be present? She asked, her voice trembling. What if you've been absent for so long that you no longer remember how it feels? Daniel looked at her with a compassion that wasn't condescending. I think you start little by little, one moment at a time, like today. You're here with your children without distractions. That's already a start. Isabel felt tears forming in her eyes, but she held them back. She wasn't used to this vulnerability, to allowing herself to feel without the filter of control. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of not being enough, of having waited too long, of my children growing up and realizing their mother was always physically present, but never truly there. Daniel extended his hand, and after a moment of doubt, Isabel took it. The contact was simple, but there was a warmth in it that anchored her. It's not too late, Daniel said firmly. It's never too late, as long as you keep trying. Isabel squeezed his hand, feeling something inside her begin to heal. They looked together at the children, who were now playing hide-and-seek among the trees. Their laughter filled the air with music that was more beautiful than any symphony Isabel had heard at the elegant events she attended. 8. The final kiss and the promise. They spent the rest of the morning that way, alternating between deep conversations and comfortable silences, always with the children in their line of sight. When the sun reached its highest point, they decided to look for something to eat. There was a simple taco stand nearby with a good reputation. Isabel insisted on paying this time. Daniel accepted without false pride, but with genuine gratitude. They sat at a picnic table under a tree, the 5 of them together, sharing tacos and cold water. The children ate with ravenous appetites, smearing their faces with salsa, but not caring. Isabel watched them with a smile she hadn't worn in a long time. a smile that wasn't calculated or rehearsed. It was simply happiness. When they finished eating, Luna yawned widely and leaned against Daniel. "She's tired," he said tenderly. "I think we should leave soon." Isabel felt a pang of disappointment but nodded. Of course. The children protested, but Isabel and Daniel were firm. They promised there would be more days like this, more opportunities to play together. That promise seemed to satisfy them. When it was time to say goodbye, the three children hugged each other with that dramatic intensity only children have. Isabel and Daniel stood face to face, unsure exactly how to say goodbye. Finally, Daniel extended his hand. Isabel took it, but instead of a formal handshake, he held it a moment longer, looking into her eyes. "Take care, Isabel. You too, Daniel." They separated slowly, each taking their children's hands and walking in opposite directions. But both looked back at the same time, catching each other's gaze. And in that moment, they knew something had changed, something important, something neither of them could yet name, but both felt with absolute clarity. The following weeks brought an unexpected routine. What had begun as a chance encounter in a restaurant had become something more constant, more meaningful. Isabel and Daniel began seeing each other more frequently, always under the pretext that it was for the children, although both knew there was something deeper developing between them. Text messages became daily, simple good mornings, questions about how the day had gone, photos the children insisted on sharing. Nothing extraordinary on the surface, but every exchange built something solid, something real. Isabel discovered she looked forward to those messages with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. One Friday afternoon, while reviewing reports in her office, her phone vibrated. It was Daniel. "Luna has a presentation at school. Next Wednesday she's singing. She's very nervous but excited. I thought maybe if you have time, the boys would like to go." Isabel read the message 3 times. There was a vulnerability in that invitation that moved her. Daniel was opening an important part of his life to her, a significant moment for Luna. "I'd love to go," she replied without hesitation. "What time?" Daniel gave her the details. It was during work hours, something that normally would have been impossible for Isabel. She had meetings scheduled, commitments that had been planned for weeks. But as she looked at her calendar, something inside her made a decision that surprised even her. She canceled all the meetings. Her assistant looked at her with a confused expression when she gave the instructions, but Isabel offered no explanation, simply saying she had something important to attend to. And it was true. The following Wednesday arrived with a gray sky that threatened rain. Isabel picked up Lucas and Elias from school early, explaining where they were going. The twins burst into enthusiasm when they found out they would see Luna. Luna's school was very different from the exclusive private school where Lucas and Elias studied. It was an older building with walls that needed fresh paint and classrooms that had clearly seen decades of use. But there was something warm about that place, something authentic that was missing from the perfectly maintained institution where Isabel paid tuition that cost more than many people's monthly salaries. Daniel was waiting for them at the entrance. When he saw Isabel, his face lit up with a smile that made the entire trip worthwhile. "You came," he said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "Of course I came," Isabel replied. "I wouldn't miss it." They entered the small auditorium where the presentation would take place. Plastic chairs were arranged in rows, and other families were already starting to settle in. Isabel noticed the curious glances some directed toward her. Her clothes, although she had chosen something more discreet, were still clearly expensive, but she sat down without discomfort next to Daniel, with Lucas and Elias on her other side. The presentation began with children from different grades taking the stage to recite poems or sing songs. Some were very confident, others clearly terrified. Isabel watched with a smile, vaguely remembering Lucas and Elias's presentations when they were younger. She had attended some, but always with her phone in hand, always answering emails during the parts that didn't involve her children. This time, she put her phone away completely. When Luna's name was announced, Daniel straightened in his seat. Isabel saw his hands clench on his knees, sharing his daughter's nervousness. Luna took the stage with small steps, wearing her favorite floral dress and her hair neatly braided. Clearly, Daniel had done it that morning. She stood in front of the microphone, saw the sea of faces before her, and for a moment, it seemed she would freeze. But then her eyes found Daniel, and then they found Isabel, Lucas, and Elias. Her face transformed, and she began to sing. Her voice was small at first, trembling, but with each verse, it grew stronger, more confident. She sang a song about family, about the love that sustains us even on difficult days. The words were simple, age-appropriate, but there was something in the way Luna sang them that made them profound. Isabel felt tears forming in her eyes. She glanced at Daniel and saw that he, too, was struggling with his emotions. There was pride on his face, but also something more. There was the awareness of everything he had sacrificed to give Luna this life, this moment, this opportunity to shine. When Luna finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. She made a small, shy bow and ran off the stage. Daniel immediately stood up, with Isabel and the twins following him. They found Luna in the hallway, and before he could say anything, Daniel lifted her into his arms and hugged her tightly. "You were perfect, my love. Completely perfect." Luna clung to his neck, hiding her flushed face. When Daniel put her down, Isabel knelt in front of her. "You were incredible, Luna. You sang beautifully." "Really?" Luna smiled shyly. "Really," Isabel confirmed. "You should be very proud of yourself." Lucas and Elias surrounded Luna, bombarding her with compliments and questions about how she had learned the song. Luna blossomed under their attention, speaking more animatedly than Isabel had ever seen her. Daniel gently touched Isabel's arm, moving slightly away from the group of children. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "It means a lot to Luna and to me." Isabel looked him in the eyes. "You don't have to thank me. I wanted to be here." Daniel held her gaze for a long moment, and in that silence, something passed between them. They weren't words. They weren't explicit promises, but it was a recognition that this, whatever was growing between them, was real. The other parents began to disperse, picking up their children and leaving the building. Daniel suggested they all go out to eat something to celebrate. Isabel accepted without hesitation. They ended up at a small, nearby ice cream parlor, the kind of place Isabel would never have chosen on her own, but that turned out to have the best ice cream she had ever tasted. The children ordered extravagant flavors with impossible toppings, while Daniel and Isabel shared a more modest cup. They sat at an outdoor table, watching the children enjoy their ice cream with the carefree joy of childhood. "You know," Isabel said after a moment, "I canceled very important meetings today to come." Daniel looked at her, surprised. "Seriously?" Isabel nodded. "Meetings that had been scheduled for weeks with people who are not easy to reschedule. And do you regret it?" Daniel asked carefully. Isabel thought about it honestly. "No, not at all. In fact, I think it's the best decision I've made in a long time." Daniel smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. But Isabel, I don't want you to feel like you have to change your life for us. Your work is important." "I know," Isabel replied. "And it will continue to be. But I'm starting to understand that it can't be the only important thing. That if I keep letting it consume all my time, I'm going to miss moments like this. And these moments..." She looked at Lucas and Elias, who were now competing with Luna to see who could make the funniest face. These moments are the ones that truly matter. Daniel said nothing, but he extended his hand across the table. Isabel took it without hesitation. They stayed that way, fingers intertwined, watching their children laugh under the afternoon sun. It was a perfect moment in its imperfection. There was nothing elaborate, nothing expensive, nothing designed to impress. There was only presence, connection, and the growing certainty that both had found something they hadn't known they were looking for. When they finally said goodbye that night, after hours of conversation and laughter, Daniel approached Isabel. He hesitated for a moment, and she could see the question in his eyes before he asked it. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Just the two of us, without the children." Isabel felt her heart race. She knew what that question truly meant. It was crossing a line, officially turning this into something more than a friendship developed for their children's sake. "I would like that," she replied, her voice soft but sure. "Very much." Daniel smiled, and it was a smile filled with relief and hope. "Saturday night is free for me. My neighbor can watch Luna." "Saturday is perfect," Isabel confirmed. "The twins can stay with their nanny." They looked at each other for a moment longer, aware that something important had just been decided. Then they said goodbye, each leading their children toward their respective homes. But that night, neither of them slept much. They were too busy thinking about Saturday, about what it would mean, about everything that was changing. And for the first time in a long time, both allowed themselves to feel excitement for the future. Not for professional achievements or material goals, but for the simple possibility of something real, something deep, something worth fighting for. Mike's, the unlikely partnership. The future begins. Saturday arrived, charged with an anticipation Isabel hadn't felt in years. She prepared with a care that went beyond vanity, choosing an elegant but not ostentatious dress, subtle makeup that highlighted her features without hiding them. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a different woman than she had been months ago. There was softness in her eyes, a vulnerability she no longer tried to conceal. Daniel had suggested a small restaurant in a neighborhood Isabel had never visited. It wasn't luxurious, but it had a reputation for serving the best homemade food in the city. When Isabel arrived, she found Daniel waiting for her outside. He wore a clean shirt and dark pants, clearly his best clothes, and there was something moving in the effort he had made. "You look beautiful," Daniel said when she approached. "You look very nice too," Isabel replied sincerely. They entered the restaurant together. It was intimate, with small tables lit by candles and soft music in the background. The owner greeted Daniel with familiarity. He clearly knew him, and he led them to a table by the window. The first few minutes passed with the comfort they had developed during the previous weeks. They talked about their children, about the week they had had, about small, everyday anecdotes. But there was something different in the air that night, a tension that wasn't uncomfortable, but charged with possibility. Finally, after the waiter took their orders, Daniel leaned slightly forward. "Isabel, there's something I need to tell you." Isabel felt her heart race, but she kept her voice calm. "I'm listening." Daniel took a breath as if gathering courage. "When I met someone at that restaurant weeks ago, I never imagined my life would change this way. I thought it would just be a strange dinner, an awkward moment we would quickly forget." Isabel smiled slightly. "I thought the same, but it wasn't," Daniel continued. "Every time I talk to you, every time I see you with Luna, with my boys, I feel something I haven't felt since I lost my wife. And at first, it scared me. I felt guilty, as if I was betraying her memory." Isabel extended her hand across the table, gently touching Daniel's. "You don't have to feel guilty for continuing to live, for allowing yourself to feel." "I know," Daniel said, intertwining his fingers with hers. "And I've come to understand that she would have wanted me to be happy, that Luna should have a complete family, that I shouldn't live in the past forever. He paused, looking her directly in the eyes. Isabel, I've fallen in love with you, with your strength, your vulnerability, the way you're learning to be present, how you look at your children when you think no one is watching, your laughter, your honesty. Everything you are. Isabel felt tears forming in her eyes. She had expected this conversation to come, but hearing the words aloud impacted her in a way she didn't anticipate. I've fallen in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you need. I don't know if I'm enough. Daniel squeezed her hand firmly. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be you. The woman who canceled important meetings to see my daughter sing. The woman who sat on a park bench for hours just to watch the children play. The woman who is willing to change, to grow, to try. Isabel let the tears fall freely. I'm so afraid now of ruining this. Then we'll ruin it together, Daniel said with a soft smile. And we'll fix it together. That's what people who love each other do. The food arrived, but neither of them was very hungry. They ate little, talked a lot, and with every word they built something more solid. They talked about the future, about how they would integrate their lives, about the challenges they would face. The children, Isabel said after a while. How do we tell them? Daniel smiled. I think they already know. Children have a way of seeing things that we adults complicate too much to understand. Isabel laughed softly. You're right. Lucas asked me last week if Daniel was going to be part of our family. And what did you tell him? I told him I hoped so. After dinner, Daniel suggested they walk a little. The streets were quiet, lit by antique lampposts that created an almost magical atmosphere. They walked side by side, their hands intertwined, in no hurry to get anywhere. Finally, they stopped at a small, empty park at that hour of the night. They sat on a bench under a huge tree whose branches spread like protective arms. Isabel, Daniel said after a long silence, I know our lives are very different. I know you come from a world of luxury, and I can barely offer this basic neighborhood. But I promise you that I will love you with everything I have, that I will be present, that I will be honest, that I will fight for us every day. Isabel turned to look at him completely. Daniel, I don't need luxury. I've had all the luxury in the world, and I felt empty. What I need is exactly what you're offering me. Presence, honesty, real love. She leaned toward him, and for the first time, they kissed. It was a kiss full of promise and hope, of vulnerability and courage. When they separated, both were smiling. What do we do now? Isabel asked. Daniel shrugged with a smile. I think we wake up tomorrow and keep building, one day at a time, one day at a time. They stayed in that park for hours, talking about everything and nothing, making plans, and also simply enjoying the shared silence. When Daniel finally walked her back to her car, they said goodbye with another kiss and the promise to see each other the next day. Isabel drove home with a sense of completeness she had never experienced. When she quietly entered her house, she found Lucas and Elias still awake, waiting for her in the living room. How was it? Lucas asked, with barely contained curiosity. Isabel smiled, a genuine, complete smile. It was perfect. Are you going to see him again? Elias asked. Yes, Isabel replied. We're going to see him many times more. The twins looked at each other and smiled knowingly. We knew you liked him, they said in unison. Isabel laughed and hugged them both. I love you. You know that? We love you too, Mommy, Lucas replied. And we like seeing you happy. That night, after putting the boys to bed, Isabel stayed in her room, looking out the window. The city sparkled in the distance, but for the first time she didn't feel separate from it. She felt part of something bigger, something beautiful. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Daniel. "Thank you for tonight. Thank you for giving me a second chance to be happy." Isabel replied with a full heart. "Thank you for showing me what really matters, for showing me it's never too late to change." Daniel's reply came almost immediately. "Sleep well. Tomorrow, Luna wants to invite Lucas and Elias to breakfast. Does that work?" Isabel smiled. "We would love that." She put the phone on the nightstand and went to bed, finally feeling profound peace. She didn't know exactly what the future would hold, what challenges they would face, how they would navigate the complexities of uniting two families with such different lives. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had found something real. She had found love. Not the kind of love from perfect movies or idealized novels, but the kind of love built day by day, in small moments, in conscious choices to be present, to be vulnerable, to grow together. And as she closed her eyes, Isabel allowed herself to dream. She dreamed of noisy breakfast with 5 people around the table. She dreamed of quiet nights after long days. She dreamed of teaching Luna about business while Daniel taught her about carpentry. She dreamed of seeing her 3 children grow up together, supporting each other. She dreamed of a life worth living, a life full of true love. And for the first time in a long time, Isabel Rodriguez fell asleep completely happy, completely at peace, completely hopeful for the future she was about to build, alongside the man who had arrived in her life in the most unexpected way, changing everything forever. Conclusion and final call to action. The story of Isabel and Daniel proves that true love is often found in the most unexpected places, and that the greatest reward is building a life based on presence and honesty, not wealth or status. They found their way to happiness by prioritizing the simple truth of family. What do you think? Was Daniel's humble, persistent approach the key to overcoming Isabel's emotional walls? If this story of genuine connection and second chances resonated with you, please hit like and share this video. Your support helps us tell stories that speak directly to the heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for our next gripping tale.